What's up? Welcome to Tales Tomorrow. I'm Morrow, your storyteller for today, and with me I have some more RPG horror stories. But you know what? With these RPG horror stories, we need a little bit of a cleanse, a little bit of a refresher, a little bit of fresh breath of air. What I'm talking about here are glory stories. If you have your own glory story, go ahead and send it my way. If you already sent them my way, I appreciate you. You can send over by the email, and I'm also gonna find my own glory stories to share. And we just need to have a nice glory storython or something like that. I don't know. I'm still workshopping the name. Anyway, let's get some RPG horror stories for today. But if you want to submit your own glory story, email down in the description below. Player gets mad that he went AFK without telling anyone and missed important lore. Spoilers for Curse of Strahd. This story is about a player, let's call him Steve, who decides to get mad at me, DM, when he went AFK during an incredibly important story moment I didn't tell anyone. Short and minor horror story, but basically we're playing Curse of Strahd via Roll20 online, and the party meets Rictavio. The party earns his trust of Rictavio, who reveals he's actually an older gnome by the name of Rudolf van Richten. He reveals himself to be a gnome disguising as a half-elf when he takes off his hat of disguise, bending the rules a bit for hat of disguise, obviously. During this introduction, I could hear at least 2 out of the 4 players comment or respond back to this revelation. Steve was not being one I heard from, but Steve did not put anything into the chat or say in voice chat that he was walking away. So for all intents and purposes, he was there hearing everything being said. Later, the party finds out that a lady has been asking around for an older looking gnome. Steve then starts asking questions like, DM, have we seen any gnomes? Does the person we're talking to know what a gnome is? And some pretty strange questions, since he's supposed to know that he met a gnome NPC not too long ago. Answered the best way I could without directly saying, yeah, obviously this lady is looking for one gnome he met the whole game, but it gets to a point where I have to stop the party for a second to recap. So, you guys remember what happened when you met Rictavio, right? Silence. The one player pops up, yeah, he was a gnome, right? I affirm that. Then Steve asks, well, what the hell, DM? How does this person we're talking to not know what a gnome is? How has she not seen some by the description we're giving her we're literally describing? And otherwise starts getting really frustrated and aggressive with me. If you are gonna go AFK, there's nothing wrong. Like, you gotta step away for a bit, get water, go bio, whatever you gotta do, completely understandable. I come from MMO like community and stuff, and when it comes to raiding, it's important to let people know if you're stepping away from keyboard or if something going on. Maybe your internet's going bad and you kind of going AFK or can't really move or things are lagging. You gotta communicate with folks because otherwise they don't know what's going on with you. Least the guy could do is maybe, I don't know, typing like a BRB in the chat. Pretty sure Roll20 has a chat system, Foundry has a chat system, and if any of my players go AFK or BRB, they either say in voice, BRB real quick, or gotta step away for a bit, or they just go BRB in the chat, and if anything needs to be paused for a moment to give them a recap, I make sure to do so, because my players tell me that they're going AFK or BRB, and I do the same thing as a DM. It's a very normal, courteous thing to do, and I guess Steve kind of forgot about it. I cut him up and say, Steve, what happened when Rictavio took off his hat? No answer. He turned into a gnome, Steve. Steve says, well, if he's a gnome, how does this lady... Steve, I told you he was wearing a hat of disguise. His disguised appearance is a half-elf. I literally shared artwork of his half-elf appearance when you first met him wearing the hat. Oh, I think I walked away when you were doing all that. I just didn't say anything. Ah, and there's the crux of the problem. Steve never said anything. There's nothing wrong with stepping away. The problem is here is that Steve just didn't let anybody know, and DM is like, Steve, you already were there for it. It was like an hour ago. We did the whole thing and everything. We did the whole preamble, and Steve was just like, oh, I just stepped away. Then don't get mad at the DM about it if you stepped away. If you missed the whole core part of it, it's kind of on you, Steve, especially since you don't let the DM know that you stepped away until the very last moment when the DM is trying to like remind you about what you've seen. Communicate. Communication is very important, guys. Please do communicate with your DM, even if it's just stepping away for a little bit. That's perfectly fine. Just a BRB, 3-letter word, BRB would be excellent. Either that or he straight up lied, forgetting an incredibly important detail that I revealed earlier. I don't know, very frustrating behavior from him among other things. We'll talk about this at the top of next session since I don't just let things continue. If I'm reading hundreds of pages of lore and spending dozens of hours each week session prepping, Steve can put a BRB in chat. Very reasonable ask, putting a BRB in chat when you're stepping away. There's nothing wrong with stepping away. You don't have to announce whatever you're doing. You don't have to say, I'm doing this, I'm gonna go do that, I have to do this, I have to do that. Just say BRB. Very reasonable ask. DM, I'm sorry for the frustration. Steve, start putting in BRBs, dude. It's simple as that. I think most people would just do it just naturally, just to be polite and let people know, stepping away. Anyway, let's get to the next story for today. GM uses terrible shock tactics for his games and loses all his players. Content warning, misogyny, sexual harassment, and wooey. Hey y'all, first post here and hopefully my last. No offense, I got a Call of Cthulhu theme one for y'all. So around 6 months ago, I joined a Roll20 to look for a game to play since I live in nowhere, middle of USA. I originally joined to find Vampire the Masquerade games, but like nobody plays VTM on Roll20. At least on the free games. I instead started looking for a Call of Cthulhu game, as I recently got into the game through Chaosium's Bookshop of Arkham live play series, which is fantastic and I highly recommend. There were a couple of games I showed interest in, but only one actually got back to me. This is where I met the Lore Keeper, COC's name for Dungeon Master. Do you call it COC or do you call it cock? Because I read that and I'm thinking COC, man, that's really difficult to say. Cock, for whatever reason, just so much easier. Do you call it cock? And the central character of this post, Stan. Names have been changed. Stan was a character. He had apparently been lore keeper for the past 27 years and had a weird sense of humor, and the strangest thing about him was that he had a wife and child. I still to this day do not know how. He also streamed all of his cock games on YouTube, and they're probably still out there. We ran a weekly game on Thursday nights to fit into my schedule perfectly, and I was excited but nervous to join. It was my first time playing a TTRPG with strangers and I wasn't sure how I would measure up, so to speak. Stan assured me that though his games were designed to be challenging, he was welcoming to new players interested in Call of Cthulhu. So Thursday rolled around and we started our game. No session 0 or anything. It was just me and 2 other people who were called Mark and John. The story was honestly kind of interesting. Our characters awoke in lobby of a hotel with no knowledge of how they got there. Premise was of ever-expanding hotel where you could order anything from room service. The payment, however, was your life in years. We had racked up a substantial debt. Think of the Lotus Casino from Percy Jackson. I feel like the session 0 or the lack thereof is going to play a very important role into the content warning from earlier because Steve didn't really talk about what kind of content they would have in Call of Cthulhu or COC. I imagine Call of Cthulhu, since it is a horror-themed TTRPG, you would have some cryptids and spooky things and a little bit of a darker tone to the whole thing, but you gotta make sure you talk to the players about this sort of thing just to make sure they're aware. I think session 0s are rather important, and knowing people's do's and don'ts and kind of limits of what's cool, what's not cool with them is perfectly fine. And I kind of feel like this lack of session 0 may be the crux of the issue because none of the topics of this campaign were discussed in a horror-themed, probably nightmare-themed game. Now, the first red flag came in the second session of the campaign. Our characters, both male, were going to bed for the night and we were being offered the hotel standard accommodations. Food, alcohol, cards to play games with, the standard lot. Then he offered some womanly company. Yeah, he was offering our characters sex workers. I declined, deciding it wasn't really in character, but Mark accepted, expecting just a fade to black. Stan then goes into detail about the girl's strip routine, begins to describe them approaching Mark's character on the bed before we stop him. I thought it was weird, but I brushed it off and told myself that it was fine. This game is more adult than your average D&D game, and besides, Stan stopped when we voiced our uncomfortableness, so he must be a good guy, right? Right? I'm gonna guess not. Also, is Stan gonna be like one of those fetish DMs that just has goes into gratuitous detail over any kind of sexual encounters? Stan, it's fine to just do a fade to black. You don't have to describe every single 30 minutes of ERP that happens in game. It's completely unnecessary with some games, I think. Unless you're playing a specific sex-oriented game, and everybody's perfectly on board with it, and the entire game is just dialogue of ERP, whatever. Do whatever you want. Roll for ERP, roll for orgasm, I don't know, roll whatever. But as long as everybody's aware that that's what's going on, and it's not just being a surprise moment. Surprise, in my fetish game. Get ready for succubi girls. Anyway, let's continue. A couple of months passed without a real incident. Our characters died escaping the hotel. Mark's actually died falling down the stairs. He ended up leaving after this. Not sure if it was because of this though. And we started a new mini campaign. We picked up a couple of players along the way, including one who I'll call Charlie, another I'll call Aaron. Has anybody watched the Comedy Central's Key and Peele show? Where they had the guy go hey Aaron. That stuck in my head. You know what? This guy's name is now Aaron. This campaign was more unoriginal. A town goes crazy and everyone starts killing each other. But whatever, we could have fun with this. The campaign is going fine so far. I'm playing a female nurse who was raised in an ideal childhood and is too precious for this world. John's character, being played by Stan since John couldn't make it to this session, fumbled a persuasion check and bit off the end of his tongue as punishment, put on this annoying voice to signify this, and was nigh incomprehensible at times, so we decided to try and fix it. Both me and Charlie's character were nurses, so we thought it would be easy. For some reason though, Stan decided that Aaron's character wouldn't want his tongue, which he bit so hard it split, fixed. We had a lengthy debate trying to get his tongue fixed, until eventually I decided to roll persuasion. I fumbled it and was to receive my punishment. Maybe I'll bite my tongue and have to do a stupid voice like him, I thought. Maybe he would just make the existing injury worse. No. Instead, Stan launches into detailed explanation of how my character receives a traumatic flashback from the time her dad beat her and struggle snuggled her mother repeatedly. Reminder, this was not a part of her character at all. He just decided that it was, though. It was a serious breach of player agency and also just messed up. I was decently uncomfortable now, but I didn't say anything because, again, I thought that it might have been normal for cock. No. This is a breach of this is just, okay, hold on a sec. If in any game, any TTRPG game, the DM starts putting in some sort of stuff that part of your backstory didn't happen, going through content like this just out of nowhere, just like with the whole stripper situation, as y'all spoke up, this was a prime, ample time to speak up and say, whoa, pump your brakes then, man. Let's go ahead and cover this first. First of all, not part of my backstory. Second of all, what the hell? No heads up or anything about this sort of thing? Huh? So anyway, we finished the campaign. Something about the cat goddess Bast making people go crazy. We defeat her by blowing up her wheelbarrow full of dynamite. A week passes and Stan immediately launches into the next campaign. And little did I know this campaign would be the last. Our characters were approached by a guy named Tom to go on an expedition to Argentina to look for rare artifacts at a dig site. The only way to get there was by boat. However, because I guess planes weren't invented in 1930s, and the very first thing that Stan mentioned is how excited the sailors are to finally be around a woman again, specifically how horny they were. Okay, fine, whatever. This kind of thing was normal for Stan at this point, and it never seemed to reflect his attitude towards real women. Wait a minute, hold on, you gotta give the guy a pass after he did the first thing with the stripper thing or the hooker or whatever it's called, and then the whole your nerd's character and the flashback for the father and mother and struggle snuggle and stuff. You don't think this is a red flag? I think at this point it's a first time shame on me, second time shame on you, third time, okay, this is getting boring, what is this guy up to kind of thing, you know? I feel like this is a perfect red flag that gives away that Stan is about to pull something. If he has to mention the fact that sailors are so horny, maybe he's gonna do something kind of a little more on the fetish side of things or sexual side of things. I don't know, to me it sounds like a perfect red flag. Bright as crimson, we decide to get to Argentina and decide to explore the city of Buenos Aires. I don't know how to pronounce it. And the very first thing that happens is we see some random woman get stabbed to death and take sanity damage. Why? Who knows? We didn't roll poorly or anything, it just happened. I'm still not sure why it happened. I was planning on talking to Stan after the game at this point, but he exited the call before I could, and I forgot about it by the next day. I missed the next week, but apparently we got a new person before she dropped out an hour into it. She said she found a better game that fit her schedule, but Stan was apparently talking about how some people just can't handle my games. And then the final session happened. It's almost like he took her leaving as a challenge to see how far his game could go. Yeah, that girl probably did herself a service. She probably wasn't there for an hour, decided this is not worth it. I'ma say, I have a new game coming up. Sorry, the schedule doesn't work out. Oh, honestly, she saw the problem and ran for the hills. Good for her. So in the campaign, Eldritch BS happens, and our characters are transported to a world not our own. Our only lead is Tom, the guy who leads us on the expedition, who's now the mayor of Arkham, Massachusetts, a big place in Call of Cthulhu mythos. We track down his office and ring up the receptionist to make appointment. She tells us it'll be a bit of a wait, so we decide to do a bit of snooping while we wait. Charlie's, who was absent at the time, character and my character distract the receptionist while Aaron's character snoops around, finding a pair of double doors. He passes a roll to peek inside, and Stan says this: "You see a child, his legs draped over the desk at the back of the room. He's crying, and in front of him is some sort of creature with tons of tentacles." You can imagine what our thoughts were. Oh no, you didn't. Wanted nothing of that sort to happen, so we burst through the door. Me and Charlie were there suddenly. Again, not the best DM. And the child was fine. He was sitting on the lap of the mayor and smiling. Something was still off though. And I didn't like the implication of molestation, But it got worse. Child passes my character and Stan asks for a spot hidden role. Hard success, I say. The child is walking funny, he replied. Because of the content warning from earlier, he's actually fucking implying what I think he's implying? I was going to have some choice words for him. We finished up the mini campaign, and before I can say anything, he launches into the next one. That was about an hour before the session was set to end, and I guess he thought we could just start a new one. This one had us approach to take an expedition to a foreign country to look for something. Okay, how do you just not tell the guy stop and like speak to him and like tell him to pump the brakes and just talk over him? I think at this point, you know, it's rude to talk over people, but I think this is a perfect time to pump the brakes and talk about stuff and figure out if he's going to be pulling his weird, creepy, just disgusting fetish stuff into this. Because at this point, he's just reaching towards the fetish grounds. Not only does he have like some really questionable things he's done already, but he's including a child and tries to imply that the child's walking funny. If you ever heard somebody imply somebody like walking funny, it's usually after they get, what's the best way to put it together on YouTube without getting completely censored? Strenuous physical activity forces them to walk funny because they are now stuff. Yeah, that's what I mean. But I'd also consider the fact that it's a kid. I want to throw up. Already, I'm pretty pissed with him, but I rolled up a new character. I basically made Lara Croft from Tomb Raider in the 1920s. We're traveling by boat again, and he starts the same horny sailor's shtick again, but this time directed at my character. I'm not having any of it though, so my character tells the sailors that she'd cut off their balls if they looked at her wrong. Violent, but I thought I would not only send a message to the sailors, but also to Stan that I wasn't enjoying this. If you weren't enjoying this, why did you stay? For real, is this guy really worth it? I get not many people running Call of Cthulhu and stuff like that, and I get not many people running Vampire the Masquerade. Leaving and not playing in this nightmare would be way better than doing anything else at all. He had one of the sailors come up to my character and tell her, you know, this trip is gonna be dangerous. You might die. Why not have a little fun before you die, huh? And my character turned to Aaron and asked him for protection with these a-holes, and he agrees. With that, the session ends, and I'm pretty pissed. I play TTRPGs to get away from real life crap. I don't want to have to deal with sexual harassment and children things in them. How could a man with wife and child think either of those were okay? It's important to note, at no point did Stan ever ask us if we were okay with this, or even signify that this would happen. Not in his rules, not in his Roll20 post, and certainly never in person. I don't think even Session 0 could have fixed it. Nobody could have prepared the players for this. Nobody could have prepared. It's literally just Stan with this weird fetish stuff that he wants to put in. And you know what? Y'all probably should have asked the wife, like, hey, do you know that your husband is running this sort of content in his games and stuff? Is that the kind of thing he's into? Is this something that's need to be like y'all need to talk about and stuff? You probably should know about this, because I feel like somebody should have told her. I feel like somebody should have had up a debate or discussion. Maybe she doesn't know. Maybe nobody knows except Stan himself, because he keeps us in his closet. His closet of weird fetishes that he unleashes in a TTRPG game of all things. Oh god. Let's continue trying to throw up together. It was clear that he was just doing the harassment bit as a joke, and that child stuff thing was certainly for shock value, but that didn't make it okay. Made it almost worse, in fact, because it showed that he clearly didn't treat those things with the care and respect needed to portray them. It was just a game to him. We had a lengthy talk with Stan after the session, and his response to our uncomfortableness was, "That's the way I always run it," which doesn't make it okay by any stretch of the matter. We, after informing Charlie of the incident, decided to draft up our complaint with him and see what he had to say for himself. If he responded with an apology and a promise to grow, we'd stay. Anything else, we're out of there. He responded saying the same thing as before, that it was always the way I've ran it. So we left. Me, Charlie, Aaron, and John have since started our own game night together, while I run VTM and Charlie runs COC. We've been away from Stan for a month now, and I think we're better for it. Charlie's honestly a better DM than Stan ever was, and I'm getting more confident with my DMing skills. Stan's Roll20 game has since disappeared, and he hasn't streamed since then, so I guess he gave up on looking for new players to play with, or maybe he never started. Who knows? Who cares? So, yeah, good! We finally had a good ending, but you know what? Y'all honestly should have left way sooner, especially after the implication with the whole child thing. Especially, because it's gross. It's gross and disgusting and very disturbing. I get if you want to have like horny sailors where everybody's, you know, of age. I get if you want to have like a night girl, you know, working nights and stuff, or working girl at nights of age. But like, when you put a child in a fetish thing, that's immediately 100% unmitigated no. It should be a no from everybody. Stuff is gross and disgusting and extremely fucking disturbing. Stan is a very disturbed man, and I hope he never runs a game of this kind of caliber again. Because, ew, gross. And with that, that's gonna be all our stories for today. I want to thank you very much for watching, and thanks so much for being here. If you like what I do, consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Also, if the RPG Horror Stories ever goes down, or if you want to submit your own personalized horror story, email is down in the description below. I'll see you again in more Tales Tomorrow. Bye-bye.